We always think the person with the power is the one who pulls away, the one who creates distance, the one who refuses to talk. But there's something no one tells you. When the anxious person finally walks away, the avoidant isn't celebrating, they're panicking. They just don't show it the way you do. Set the stage. The push-pull dynamic, aldring ordnek, and threenstier into this weight, advenor in the keens, and that salicha of relationships, there's a painful dance. One person craves closeness while the other fears it. You reach out, they pull away. You get emotional, they get silent. You ask for more, they give less. It feels like you're always the one begging for love, and they always seem calm, unbothered, detached. But here's what most people miss. Their calm isn't strength, it's fear avoidance. And the anxious partner's neediness. It's emotional honesty that hasn't yet learned its power. Why avoidance don't change when you stay. As long as you keep texting, explaining, crying, chasing, they never feel the loss. They never feel your absence. And because of that, they never feel the urgency to grow. Avoidants are uncomfortable with intimacy, but they're not immune to love. What they fear more than closeness is vulnerability. So when you stay, they tell themselves, she'll always be there. She needs me more than I need her. I'm safe to stay distant. When you stay in a relationship with an avoidant partner despite being hurt, something subtle but powerful happens in their mind. They begin to believe their behavior has no consequences. You may cry, argue, plead, or explain how you feel, but to them, the bottom line is, you're still there. Your presence, no matter how emotional, signals to them that you're not going anywhere. So why would they change? To them, the relationship is working. You're doing the emotional labor for two, and they're allowed to keep their distance without cost. Avoidants are wired to value space over closeness because closeness often feels threatening to their emotional survival. When you stay, they interpret your consistency as proof that their emotional distance is acceptable. They may not think of it consciously, but deep down they start to believe that they can continue operating this way without losing you. Your continued presence becomes a buffer. They don't have to face discomfort, challenge their patterns, or grow. You're accommodating their limitations, so their world doesn't require change. Your effort to fix things can actually make things worse. Every time you try harder to connect, they retreat further. The more available you are, the less urgency they feel. To an avoidant, emotions often feel overwhelming. So if you're always the one initiating tough conversations or expressing need, they see it not as vulnerability, but as pressure. Your love, in their eyes, becomes something to escape from, not something to step into. And if you never leave, they never need to deal with what they're avoiding, real intimacy. Even when you're hurting, they don't interpret your pain as a sign they should change. They interpret it as a sign you're too emotional, too sensitive, or too needy. In other words, your continued efforts get dismissed because they don't feel the impact of their behavior in a way that truly challenges their comfort zone. They need emotional consequences, not emotional explanations. Change doesn't come from words, it comes from loss. And as long as you're still showing up, they feel safe in their dysfunction. Staying doesn't teach them the value of your presence. It teaches them that your love comes unconditionally, even when they don't meet your needs. That's not love. That's emotional self-abandonment. For an avoidant to truly reflect and evolve, they have to confront what it feels like to lose you. That doesn't happen through another conversation or another plea. It happens when your actions finally say what your words never could. I'm done settling for less than I give. The shift that changes everything. But then something changes. The anxious person starts to wake up. They realize, this isn't love. This is me chasing breadcrumbs and calling it a meal. And when they walk away, not out of anger, but clarity, everything flips. The avoidant loses control. The silence they once used as power becomes their prison. Their freedom feels like abandonment. Their calm becomes chaos. Because for the first time, you're not waiting, you're not pleading, you're not chasing, you're gone. Something shifts when the anxious partner stops trying. Not because they stopped caring, but because they finally see the pattern for what it is, emotionally one-sided. After countless moments of begging for connection, for consistency, for effort, and being met with avoidance, they hit emotional exhaustion. But this time, instead of reacting, they retreat. Not with drama, but with silence. And that silence is different. It's not punishment, it's clarity. It's the realization that their needs will never be met in this dynamic unless something changes. What makes this shift so powerful is that it's not loud. There's no big argument, no tearful goodbye, no desperate last plea. It's quiet. It's steady. The anxious person begins to reclaim their energy. They stop over-explaining. They stop checking their phone. They stop waiting for crumbs. They start doing the very thing the avoidant never expected. They detach. And this detachment isn't out of bitterness, it's out of peace. It's the kind of peace that says, I'm not chasing anymore. I've learned what my love is worth. This change is terrifying to the avoidant, even if they don't show it at first. They've grown used to you reaching out, fixing things, softening conflict. So when that stops, they don't know how to respond. At first, they may rationalize it. She's probably just upset. But time passes, and when the silence continues, when your absence becomes consistent, they start to feel the tension rise, because suddenly they're no longer in control of the emotional rhythm. You've taken your power back. Avoidants tend to respond emotionally on a delay. While you felt the pain in real time, they only feel it when they sense your distance. It creeps in slowly, first as discomfort, then as anxiety. They check your social media, they reread old texts, they wonder why you haven't reached out, and now the space they used to crave starts to feel like abandonment. The very thing they tried to avoid, emotional intimacy, becomes the thing they're suddenly desperate to get back. But you're no longer there to fill that gap. This is the moment where roles flip. The anxious partner finds strength in letting go, and the avoidant is left to confront what they've pushed away. Real change only becomes possible when the dynamic breaks. When your consistent love is no longer guaranteed, the avoidant finally feels the consequence of their emotional walls, not because you punished them, but because you stopped protecting them from reality. And in that space, they're finally forced to ask themselves, what am I so afraid of that I let something real slip away? What happens inside the avoidant after you leave? Avoidants have a delayed emotional response. They don't panic when you cry, they panic when you're indifferent, when your texts stop, when the door closes quietly. They start thinking, what if she meant it this time? Why doesn't she care anymore? Why do I feel this sickening pull to go after her now? This isn't love suddenly blooming, this is emotional consequence. They're no longer in control of the narrative, because you're no longer playing the role they expected. At first, the avoidant feels relief. Your silence means no pressure, no emotional conversations, no demands for closeness. They may even convince themselves this is better, that space is what they needed all along. But what they don't realize is that this silence isn't temporary. This time, you're not pulling back to reset, you're gone. And what starts as peace quickly becomes disorientation. They've lost the emotional buffer you always provided, the stability they never admit they relied on. As days or weeks pass, a slow discomfort begins to creep in. The avoidant starts noticing your absence in the tiny moments when something reminds them of you. When they pick up their phone instinctively to message you and realize they can't, they feel the void. But they won't name it as sadness yet. It shows up as irritability, restlessness, even confusion. They wonder why they feel off, not realizing that your emotional presence had become a quiet comfort, one they never properly acknowledged. Avoidants are deeply uncomfortable with vulnerability, so instead of reaching out or expressing regret, they try to rationalize their way through it. Maybe she didn't really care, maybe this is for the best, but these thoughts ring hollow, because deep down they know they lost something real. And now that the anxious partner has stopped cushioning every emotional blow, the avoidant is left to feel their own pain for once. And for someone who spent their life avoiding emotional depth, that pain feels overwhelming. Eventually the panic sets in, not the dramatic kind, but a slow sinking fear. They wonder if you've moved on, if you ever loved them at all. They check your online activity, they replay your last words, they try to trace where the power shifted and why they suddenly feel so exposed. The silence they once used as control now feels like rejection. And because they never learned to manage their emotions, they don't know how to process this new reality. They need someone who finally stopped needing them. This is the avoidant's internal reckoning. Left alone with the space they claim to want, they're forced to face their own emotional limitations. They may try to return, hoping to reset the old dynamic, but what they're really chasing is the version of you that tolerated their distance, and that version is gone. You didn't leave to hurt them, you left to heal. And in doing so, you showed them the truth. Without growth, without effort, without reciprocity, even the most patient love will eventually walk away. Let's talk about the power of detachment. Let's be clear, walking away isn't about teaching them a lesson, it's about remembering yours. You are not here to be someone's emotional rehab center. You are not here to prove you're lovable by tolerating neglect. You are not here to win over someone who can't sit with your closeness. Your value isn't in how much you endure, it's in how willing you are to walk away when your needs aren't met. Detachment isn't about pretending you don't care, it's about choosing yourself when caring too much begins to cost you your peace. The anxious partner often thinks love means holding on, no matter how painful it becomes. But real love, especially self-love, sometimes means stepping back. Not to manipulate, not to create fear, but to protect your heart from being chipped away by someone who can't meet you halfway. When you detach, it doesn't always feel powerful at first. It feels like grief, like silence, where there used to be effort. But that silence is sacred. It's the space where your nervous system finally stops fighting for someone else's affection, where your worth is no longer measured by their attention. Detachment gives you back what anxiety stole: your clarity, your dignity, your emotional freedom. It reminds you love should not require you to lose yourself. For the avoidant, your detachment sends a completely different message than all your past words ever did. Your calm distance speaks louder than your pleading ever could. They no longer get to feel in control by staying distant while you close the gap. The gap stays, and for the first time, they feel its full weight. Detachment forces them to sit in the very space they used to crave and realize it's only comfortable when you're still reaching for them. The power of detachment isn't about revenge, it's about truth. When you're no longer emotionally entangled, you see things clearly, you stop making excuses, you stop shrinking to fit inside someone else's limitations. And ironically, that's when they often come back. Not because they've changed, but because your absence created a void they don't know how to fill. But now you're no longer trying to be their emotional caretaker. You've reclaimed your boundaries. In the end, detachment is the greatest test of your growth. It asks, can you love someone and still walk away if that love is costing you your self-respect? Can you grieve what you wanted without settling for what you got? The anxious person doesn't lose their ability to love. They simply learn to stop overextending it. And that's when everything changes, not just for the avoidant, but for you. Because now you're loving from strength, not survival. What true strength looks like. The anxious partner's superpower isn't their sensitivity. It's their capacity to love deeply and then let go with dignity. Not because they stopped loving, but because they finally started loving themselves more. And that moment, when the anxious finally walks away with quiet strength, that's when the avoidance nightmare truly begins. Because for the first time, they realize they just lost someone who was never afraid to love them. And now they have to ask themselves the question they've avoided all along. Why did I push away the one person who would have stayed if I had just shown up? True strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's the quiet decision to stop begging for love. It's choosing not to text, not to explain, not to chase after someone who continually makes you feel small. It's the moment you finally realize that proving your worth to someone else is the fastest way to forget it yourself. Real strength is restraint, the kind that says, I could reach out, but I respect myself too much to do that anymore. Strength isn't found in how long you hold on. It's in how bravely you let go when staying means abandoning your needs. It's easy to stay where there's potential, where you almost feel loved. What's hard is walking away when your heart still wants to hope. But that's where your power lives, in the choice to honor what you deserve, not just what you feel. Strong people feel deeply, they just don't let those feelings compromise their standards. It takes strength to sit with the discomfort of detachment, to cry and not reach out, to miss someone and not beg for their presence, to love someone but still choose distance because your peace matters more than their inconsistency. That's not coldness, that's emotional maturity. It's saying, I won't betray myself just to feel temporarily close to someone who keeps showing me they're not ready to meet me fully. The strongest people are not the ones who win others back, they're the ones who stop needing to. They don't measure their value by whether someone regrets losing them. They measure it by how well they protect their energy, their time, and their heart. They don't stay to be chosen. They leave to choose themselves. And from that space of wholeness, they create space for relationships that feel mutual, safe, and emotionally sustainable. True strength is soft but grounded. It doesn't scream for attention or validation. It simply lives in alignment. It trusts that walking away from the wrong thing makes space for the right one. It's not fueled by ego, but by deep self-awareness. And perhaps the bravest thing anyone can do is this: love with an open heart and still walk away when that love isn't returned with the same courage, care, and consistency. If this message hits something deep in you, don't just sit with the pain, do something with it. Subscribe for more content that helps you protect your peace, reclaim your power, and never settle for halfway love again. And if you're ready to choose you, drop a comment below with "I'm done chasing." Let's heal forward.